In this first tutorial on App Inventor, we are going to talk about the basics of MIT App Inventor. The first requirement is that you have to have a Gmail account. I assume that everybody has one. The second step is that you have to go to MIT App Inventor version 2. When you go to MIT App Inventor, the first thing that you have to do is to sign in. I already have the account, so I just click on the user ID and then the password, and then I go to my account. Now, as you can see on my account, there are so many projects which were made before. To start a new project, you click on Start New Project. You click on Projects, then Start New Project. Now you have to give a name to your project. Make sure you are following the rules of assigning project name. One of the rules is that you cannot start your project with a number and you cannot have space in the project name. So let's start the project and let's call it tutorial 1 and then click OK. We are presented with a screen which looks like this. Now this shows you your account, the Gmail account, and if you click on the down arrow, you can sign out anytime you want. My advice to you, when you are working on the workstation in school, always sign out so that the next person which goes to MIT App Inventor does not accidentally use your account. So make sure you sign out every time you're finished working with MIT App Inventor. Now, the screen has different parts. The first one is this user interface palette, which is going to be used when you want to use any one of these items which are shown on the left, like button, checkbox, date picker, and so forth. We are going to talk about them as we go along. Now, you also have these options. One is the layout, which gives you the ability to arrange all those user interface like button, enter, text box, and those things. You can place them on the screen. You just have to remember that you cannot just drag and drop an item from the user interface and put it anywhere on the screen. You can manage this using the layouts, which we're going to talk about later on. And some other stuff here, which when the time comes, you will see, how they are being used. For instance, in drawing and animation, I have to use something which is called canvas, and then I can have image sprite, or in this case, just a ball. And then, I can move the ball by changing the orientation of the device and so forth. You can have sensors. These are great when you want to deal with robots. And this is going to be used at the end of the course when we have to control our robot car. And also you can have database that you can use to save information and later on to access those information. The new part which is added to MIT App Inventor is the Lego part, which you can use to control your Lego, as long as your Lego has a Bluetooth attached to it. So this is just some of the items that you have on the left palette, which is the user interface. In the middle one, you have the screen, which, as you can see, looks like a phone, a cell phone. and you can design the look of your program or app using this arrangement. The next one is the components. Whenever we use one of these user interfaces, the component appears here. For instance, if I drag and drop a text box here, you can see a text box appears here. Now, whenever you write a program, it's a very good thing that you assign name to your objects so you can refer to them when you start doing the programming. Let's rename this text box, which says text box 1, to input. So you click on the rename and then you rename it to input and you click OK. You can see that the name has been changed to input. The only significance of changing this name is that when I use programming, I refer to the text box as input instead of text box 1. Let's do another one. Let's drag and drop a button now. And you can see I just left click on this button, and then I drag it, and then I drop it right under the text box. Again, my text box, the name is, the button, the name is button 1, which really, you can just leave it the way it is because we are not going to use button 1 in our programming. We don't refer to button 1. So either you leave the name as button 1 or you can change it. Let's rename it to, let's call it my button. So now the name changes to my button. Now on the right hand side is the properties menu. Every object that you put on the screen, on the interface here, user interface, is going to have some properties. For instance, this text box 1, when I click on it, you can see the name here on the top says input because we changed the name to input. Now it has a background color. You can make it enabled or disabled by clicking on this checkbox. You can change the font on it. So when the user types something, it's going to be bold. You can change it to italic. You can change the size of the text and so forth. Now, one thing which is very important is the height and width of the element. For instance, this one, if I want this text box to cover the whole screen, I can go to here, which refers to the width, and I can change it to fill parent. This is going to fill the whole screen because the parent for this text box is this device. So when I click OK, you can see that the text box has filled the whole screen. If I change the height of this text box to fill the parent, you can see the text box now, it's filling the whole screen and the button is at the bottom of it. So let's go and change this one back to automatic. So it's back to here. Now the button, I'm not going to change it, except if I click on the button, you can see that it says my button. So these are the properties of the button. If I go down, you can see that the button on the top, it says text for button 1, which really doesn't make sense. So let's change this one by going to the property which says text and type click. Now you can see that now the text is changed to click. Now in this tutorial, what we want to do is that when we execute this app, we want to be able, when the user click on the click button, we want to display whatever the user types in this text box. Before we go to the programming part, one thing I have noticed is that this app, if you look at the screen, it says screen 1 as the title of the main screen. To change this property, click anywhere on the device, which is shown here. Now you will see it says screen 1. Now to change the title here, go down where you see it says text and it says screen 1, change it to anything you want. Let's say my first app. And then click outside. When you go back to the screen, it says my first app. Now let's change the programming part. To display something on the screen, what we have to do, we have to use what the object is called, which is notifier. So click left on the notifier, drag and drop it on the screen. You will see notifier appears here. We don't need to change the name. If you really want to change it again, click on rename and then change notifier to anything you want. And you can see that notifier doesn't appear here because this is a non-visible component. You can use it, but the user cannot see the object on the screen, like the text box or the button. So now it's a time to use our programming part. To do the programming part, you go to the blocks section. So click on the blocks, and this is what you see. This area here is where you drag and drop all the blocks of programming that you need. Here you will see all the objects that you have dragged and dropped on the screen. One is the input, the text box, the other one is my button, which is your button, and the notifier. What we want to do is that when the user clicks on the button, we want to show the content of the text box. So click on the My Button. You will see all the events or the properties that you can use on the button. When the button is clicked is when we use this block. When my button is clicked, I want to use the content of the text box and show it using the notifier. So I have to use one of the functions available on the notifier. The notifier has some properties that we can use. One of these properties is when you go down, it says show message dialog. So I just left click on this guy and then I drag and drop it right inside when my button click. Now this one needs some inputs and you can set some values. For instance, the message is something which comes from outside. Now this message is the content of the input object. So click on the input. Now you can either use one of these functions or you can use these properties. Now the text of the input text box is the one that we're going to use. So drag and drop one of these blocks and then change it to text. So input.text is the message. And the title is what appears on the top of the notifier. And this is the one that you have to put here. The message, the title, is going to be a text. So click on the text, go up, and then select a blank text box, and then type, for instance, user message, or anything you want. Right click on this one and then duplicate it and type OK. This is the text that appears on the dialog box on the button. And that's all we need to do if we want to display the text that the user enters. Now, to test this one, there are two ways we can do it. Either we go to connect and then you say AI companion. Now, if I click on AI companion, you will see that this appears on the screen. What you have to do is to run AI companion on your device, on your phone, and then you have to read this code on your device and it's going to appear, the program is going to appear on your device. We are not going to use this option here, but what we're going to do, we're going to use the emulator. So you have to start emulator before you start using it here. I have already done it, so when I click emulator, now to start testing your program, you click on connect and then you click on the emulator and it's going to start the emulator. I have already done this part. So when I click on the emulator, this is going to appear after a short period of time. And you can see that this is the app we just created. Now, if I type, let's say, hello world, and then I click on click, you will see the user message, the one that we just typed here, user message. The OK is the text that appears on the button, and then the hello world is the text that we just typed here. This was the short tutorial on what the environment is in MIT App Inventor, and we just created a very simple application using MIT App Inventor. In the future tutorial, we're going to dive more inside and we're going to make more complicated apps.